This meeting is being recorded.
Okay, so we can start anytime. I'll introduce you. Um, Hi, everyone. Kelly Nazat here, and I am with the amazing Holly Million.
Hi,
And,
Kelly.
and we are going to talk today about creativity. We're starting week 2, and it's all about self-expression, about bringing your vision out into the world. And Holly is an amazing avatar for that one. She does amazing things. She started Artists United rather recently. And how many people are there with you?
34,000 signed up on the email list.
Just a few. Just a few. And when did you start it? It wasn't much more than how long ago? A year and a half?
2016, when you and I
Oh,
first met. We
it's
met in June of 2016, and by August I had started Artists United.
oh my God.
Isn't
Time
that
flies.
something?
It's that time-space continuum thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't subscribe to that.
Yeah, it feels like a year and it feels like a lifetime.
That is for sure.
Well, welcome, Holly. I'm very excited to have you talk with us about. I would love to introduce you myself, but I would much rather you tell us a bit about yourself and your creative process. And
Wonderful. I'm thankful to be here, Kelly. I'm so excited about your Soul Lab Alchemy of You course and everything that's going on with that. And just the first week has been so much fun, coming in through the fire as as we must begin. And just delighted to be here to share with you and also with everybody in our group. It's a really remarkable group of people. I'm looking forward to connecting more with them, and I'm happy to be here today to share my own experience. I hope it's helpful to others, and I'm looking forward to others being on this same show with you doing interviews.
Mm.
My background is eclectic, to say the least. I come from a background where I was in college. I studied literature. I was an English major, very interested in writing and storytelling and poetry and the written word, ideas. But I went to graduate school in education because I was also interested in helping people, and in particular working with young people, children and youth. And I was also passionate about the environment. So right after graduate school, I got involved with a nonprofit environmental organization. And that became my next career. Have been involved in fundraising for almost 3 decades as a result of that work in the environmental field. But I also felt a very strong need for my own creative expression, and eventually I began to be making my own films. I became a filmmaker. And then still later, there was a spiritual dimension that came into my life, and I felt that I needed some training and some experience of a community of people who were exploring the shamanic arts, people who were mystical spiritual seekers, people who had access to intuitive abilities and wanted to know how to use them in the world. So I started to get involved with shamanic work. That's how I met you. And I was very fortunate to be connected to you. And we did some work together. And now here I am, and very happy also that Artists United, the organization that I founded recently 3 years ago, is partnering with Soul Lab. And I see Soul Lab and Artists United being sort of twin flames in the organizational realm, in that we're trying to connect groups of people who formerly haven't been connected. And in the case of Artists United, that's artists in all disciplines worldwide. And in Soul Lab's case, it's people who are doing the mystical, spiritual, and healing arts. So this conversation about creativity is right up my alley. I feel like creativity is the holy grail. It's inside of all of us. We all have different versions of it. I think most of us have an artist inside of us, or a healer, or a scientist, or a teacher, other sorts of archetypes, I think, that where it's creativity that is the primary orientation to the world. And my personal mission is to try to help people to bring those archetypes forward out of themselves into the world so that those creative gifts can be expressed and combined in new and exciting ways, to be amplified and to address all the many challenges that we live in our 3D world that require attention and that really can't be solved until that we come together in collective ways and express our individual gifts. So that's me.
Wow, that's beautiful. And we kind of figured out pretty quickly after talking to each other. We met, as you said, around the shamanic work and developing within that realm. But it soon became clear that we were both at a point where we were ready to become a collective. And yeah, it's quite an amazing process. It's been really eye-opening for me to see the process you've gone through from the vision of it. It was a bit more than a vision at the time I met you, but still, it was yet to be launched, and all that you went through to make it what it is at this point. I mean, you have thousands of people from around the world participating already at this juncture, and you've been able to give birth to something that is still evolving.
It seems to me like it's never going to stop evolving. I've come to that conclusion that
Yeah.
once you create something and you bring it into the world, there's a commitment that's required to see it through to some level of development, and that in a way, a lot of the things that we create end up being bigger than ourselves, especially if we've already begun with a vision of including people, or you see it as a movement like Artists United is, which I see as a movement, a worldwide movement of artists in all disciplines coming together on a massive scale. There's a whole different level of learning involved with that. You know, you have to integrate other people and their creativity and their views of things, and that's quite challenging. The creativity that I brought into Artists United is very different from the creativity that I bring into, say, my own film work or writing, for example. Very recently, I decided that I would write a book. And in the book, I will document and share what I've learned so far on this journey into shamanism. And I feel motivated to write about the experiences and share it because I have the sense that there are a lot of people who are curious about this, or who feel they have some kind of a calling in this area, but aren't really sure if it's legitimate or if there's some sort of a path that they can pursue. So I feel like it's very important to share our stories to help encourage others to follow along in the same regard. And so I've started to write about that. And almost magically overnight, these two other people appeared who also were writing books. And I now have a writers support group of the three of us, which we're meeting every 2 weeks. One of the people is writing about artists in Trinidad, which is where she's from. And the other person is writing about his experience being a member of the Black Panther Party at its formation in the early to mid 60s.
Wow.
And then there's me writing about deciding one morning, oh, I'm a shaman. What should I do with that? And beginning to document that. So the three of us are coming from very different spheres. And but what's great is to be connecting with others who are creating, and creating a safe space where we can be supported and we can share what we're doing and ask questions and ask for feedback and know that we're kind of safe. So just like a couple days ago, I was writing about an experience that I had of journeying, and it was I've done a lot of journey work. I've either journeyed by myself or with other people. And I had a breakthrough really recently with another shaman who is very adept at drumming and rattling. She's been trained in that. And so she was holding the holding the pace for us, drumming and rattling. And I went really deep into a journey, and it was like the most vivid experience of the lower world that I've ever had, with so much detail, smells,
Hmm.
of course, visuals, but all kinds of sensory data. And so I was recording that experience and writing it into words for the first time. And what I found was that that solo experience of creativity was probably the purest experience of creativity. There wasn't anybody else to interfere or disagree, or it was just naturally, I was channeling really something different. Part of it was my memory, part of it was some kind of a higher power, for lack of another word. It was like I was re-experiencing the journey, where in the journey you're interfacing with forces that are much bigger than you are and outside of yourself. And there's something about that that's so pure and so satisfying that um, I was really happy to be having that experience, because I've been for 3 years forming an organization, which is a way more complex creative undertaking with many people involved, and it has more of its sense of frustrations and challenges. And I realized that as an artist, I need to come back to that pure personal expression of creativity for ultimate satisfaction, nourishment. Um, that's what I've been learning. I'm creating on all kinds of different levels, and but with creativity also comes a potential to be drained
Hmm.
significantly because of the amount of energy that is being put into what you're creating. So that's a conundrum, and I would love to talk to more creative people about their process and how do they stay renewed through that. How do they sustain themselves? How about you? What do you do to sustain yourself, Kelly, with your own creative process in your work with Soul Lab or outside of it?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, it sounds like, to me, for one, it sounds like a good question to have for the World Cafe thing as we go along, because I think it's a really a key uh, question. When I was listening to you, one of the things I was thinking about in the process, looking at it from the hero's journey sort of thing, uh, we all have something we aspire towards. Yet there's very often, as it shows in the throughout history and mythology, that it's usually followed by a refusal of that call, right? Because we try it out, we look around, we kick the tires, and go, no, that's not okay. But you have managed to overcome that, right? You've managed to overcome that and still push through and live into your vision. And what I'm hearing from what you're saying is some of the things you use to manage it are you get group support, you work with others. I think that's beautiful. And also, you go back to the things that are you can connect with and are tangible, and that reconnect you. Because I can imagine doing what you do with on the administrative side can be extraordinarily draining. For me, um, I the things that sustain me, the things that keep me balanced on a daily basis are my connections, my call them meditations, but I would call them connections with my guide, and journey work that I do. Whether it's in some field or other, right? Either I'm looking, kind of scrying through the field of what's evolving, what's happening, and trying to. It's always about making sure that I break whatever fixation I've been drawn into. It's a theme for me. I think that's one of our big issues. I see it with the majority of clients I work with, that when there is a problem, it's usually a problem around fixated perspectives. And I find so much of the work is around helping to disrupt that fixation so that we can get other looks into the, look into other prisms and other parts of the crystal reality. So I make a point of uh, of moving around and getting out of this office, taking Bootsy on a walk. That's usually a big one. Bike riding, doing qigong, and but I would have to say that sort of my nature goes into the journey work. So because it could be very, as I'm going from kind of Scorpio to Taurus in this world, in this lifetime, which means I'm going from a very otherworldly to very much grounded in this work. She heard a name. But yeah, so the journey work I think is really important to me. It reminds me of who I am. It reminds me of what's important, and it's always refreshing in the sense that it holds a space for seeing the world in a very very fundamental but novel at the same time perspective, in a very novel way. So yeah, that's how I do it, because I can very easily, I find myself get overwhelmed with the demands of my visions. Like
I
not
know.
having them not having them is challenging. Or not being able to enter into them. It's like, oh my God, I need to create these visions, because I think they're all the same, and I know they've been there since I was a kid.
That's my
But
dog.
I wonder if Bootsy is.
Winston's attacking the mailman right now.
Oh, I was wondering if Bootsy
Bootsy
was
already
going.
did that.
Yeah, so that's how I do mine. That's how I find my balance. And but you know what? More and more so, I'm finding that the other thing that I do, and part of it has been over the years talking with you, is talking, is connecting, and it's something that you've reinforced, and it has definitely been something I'm finding more and more interest in, and that's why it's interesting that I'm creating Soul Lab. In the beginning, I really saw it um, as following through on my love of alchemy and process, and using it as a way to help others access the inner realms without spiraling out. It's a navigator, a very faithful and powerful one. And now it's blossoming into a community builder, because it's holding space for us all to come together. And it's exactly where I'm supposed to be going, but the whole way through. Just like when I do journeys, I talk to my guide, what are we going to do? And he says, just follow me. And the whole time I'm like, why are we here? What are we doing? Why this? Why that? I'm thinking in my mind. But of course I know it's not if it's authentic, you're not going to know. And that's a part of the beauty of it. Retrospective views give you that. But in the moment, it's just to be with the mystery unfolding. So I think a lot of it for me is really about being willing to show up and improv and be with it and jump into the creative fire of it, just like this. And then I know later that there will be some other thing occurring. Like some part of me will be analyzing and chewing it. And if I let my normal reptilian, wonderfully wonderful, Unahapili self take over, it could get ugly.
It could get ugly, yeah.
It could be very destructive. So my curative for that is to meet with my guides, and my curative for that is to meet with my like I reached out to you Saturday, even in a text, just enough to say these are folks that I trust and that have my back, and I know that I can send this message out there and they'll ping back, and that's enough just to help me reorient.
So true. I'm so glad to hear you say that. I'm glad you reached out to me on that day, and that I was there as well. I do many of the same things that you're doing as far as what tools I use for my own process, and journey work is one of them. And I don't know how to describe it for somebody that doesn't do it, but for somebody who does do it, I know that time dilates. It's an extraordinary experience of almost like dipping into a cool pool of water on a hot day. You know what I'm talking about? And it's like you come back feeling like you've been gone for years, or you've been light years away from the earth.
Yeah.
And you come back and it's very restorative. I think that it's that ego, dissolution of that ego or that reptile brain that you're talking about, that the journey work kind of disconnects, unplugs for a while. So you're in a very receptive frame of mind, which is also extremely in alignment with the creative process. The more receptive you are, the more that you are receiving the divine inspiration, and that's the essence of creativity. And so the journey work is one of the major tools that I now use. I also do a daily meditation, prayer, spiritual hygiene process where I connect with my guides and other allies. And I know that that has been very helpful to me, because otherwise it can feel very lonely, that that we're isolated we're isolated bundles of consciousness. We don't have enough of a support network or protection or information. And being able to connect with the guides, the ancestors, angels, power animals, all of the team has just opened me up to way more information, validation, reassurance, confidence. I'm learning from you a lot about this, and I'd love to hear more about your meeting with your guides. I don't know, do you set an appointment calendar? What do you do? Hey, gather up team, let's talk. I should be doing that. I do that in the real world with my with friends and allies like you're describing. I have several support groups that I formed. We have one called the Vibe Tribe, another one called the Soul Patrol. I have a friend that I meet with every Thursday at 6:30 in the morning, and we meditate and we talk for a couple of hours. I've got my partner David. I have my mother. We need that kind of ability to freely express, and being in a safe environment is really essential. So those are some of my major tools. I also journal. I learned this from Julia Cameron's The Artist's Way many years ago. And so for over 20 years, I've been writing in a journal every morning, and I've saved all of my journals. So at some point I can go through them again if I feel like retracing those steps. But I think that the value of it really comes from just doing a brain dump every morning, first thing in the morning, before I do anything else. Or first I make coffee, then I sit with the journal and just let it all, whatever comes out, comes out. And it's that uncensored brain space where things will surface that are both things that need to be purged or shed, or things that are hiding in your subconscious that are solutions to problems that you're experiencing. Or again, that's sort of like a way to access those deeper layers of ourselves where the conscious mind can get in the way of the creative process that's innate to us.
What
So
is
those
it
are
about
also
the journaling to you that you think that is it kind of straddling the two hemispheres? I mean, what do you feel is so powerful about journaling that can help you access that?
I think that's a good point. I do think it is both left and right brain. I think it's also the physical act of using a paper notebook and a pen, where we live in a world of so much digital communication and computers and stuff. There's something different about that kind of communication versus the physical act of moving your hand over a piece of paper. There's a something of a body wisdom or knowledge that is able to come out through the physical act of the writing. And there's a structure to it. So just having that container of the blank piece of paper on which to put the words suddenly takes what's unconscious and intangible and makes it a tangible thing. I go back, and at the end of every session of journal writing, and usually I'll have like 5 pages of writing, I'll reread everything that I had written spontaneously without editing or any thought about what's coming out, so that I can actually almost re-meet myself on the page and really hear what it is that I had to say. And I'll often underline any key points where there's something especially helpful or insightful that has come out that I want to remember. And then the right brain is also engaged because the way that Julia Cameron advises you to do this is to simply automatically write without any pre-thought. And if you make a mistake on the page, don't bother to cross it out or correct your spelling or anything. Just dump it out. So that part it really works.
Yeah, I love that. I remember when I was younger, uh, doing I was scribing for the first time, an engagement I was having with my council of elders, and I was having them talk in one voice, and I was just trying to write down everything they said. And so I don't know, maybe like 15 minutes after I wrote this, and to me, in a certain sense, that is like one of the purest forms of right brain writing, right? It's like I'm listening and scribing, not just even thinking or writing down what I think I should, or just letting it happen. It's I'm listening to them and writing it. And I remember it was very striking to me because I must have been 20 years old at the time, 19 or 20. But I remember, and it was in my art book. And I remember going back maybe 30 minutes later and rereading it. And I think it was still too soon in a sense that it was so, different for me to do something like that. And rereading it was so soon after. My ego was still sort of involved. And I read it and I noticed that, oh my God, this sounds completely like none of it made sense to me. It sounded pompous and none of it made sense. And so I kind of put it off as a kind of failed experiment, I'm like, oh, we'll forget about it. So I let it go. And I think there's a certain ego thing, certainly at that age there was, because there was such pure information coming through that my ego was defending me against it, because in a very real sense, the ego has this duty to regulate the amount of new novel information coming in, because novel information uh, it demands a lot of output of our conscious mind to deal with it. And so there's a buffering happening with the ego, which I really appreciate. But at the time I read it and it's like, oh, this is crazy and a failed experiment. But I remember it couldn't have been more than a couple weeks later, I went back and reread it. And because my ego had thought it did its job and, pretty much dispelled the importance of this scribing event. But I went back to reread it and I was struck by the information. And still to this day, I still have that book. And that first time of doing that is still very important. It said things like I would be guiding people to the inner worlds through man-made technology. I mean, I think that was in '88, and I started laughing. I'm like, none of this makes sense, but I'm going to keep it for one day where it may make sense. But there were a lot of,
That's cool.
there were so many bits of information that came through that were so vital that even at that time I didn't know what to do with, and they knew that, and the information was coming through nonetheless. And so I feel like journaling has that capacity too, and that very visceral kinesthetic engagement definitely bridges the gap between conscious subconscious.
Oh, I'm so glad you're sharing this story. That's really a powerful story because you didn't even know what you were reading, and yet at the same time that you were in a way resisting or dismissing or limiting what was coming in, you weren't completely closing the door on that, and you left yourself to an open door to be receptive to what that would mean eventually.
Yeah.
And I think that's critical to the creative process.
Mm.
Creativity requires an openness that if it's not there, there's no channel for that energy to flow, right? To create requires openness and a way to contain, right?
Yes.
So this is
Curiosity.
the curiosity, and it's all learning. So just a little bit earlier this morning, I was having a conversation with somebody about fear of the unknown.
Mm.
And I commented that it had just occurred to me recently that I connect with a lot of different spiritual people. And there are three people that I've connected with where I realized that they had a limitation in what they were willing to believe in. And it was so fascinating to me. So
Mm-hmm.
one of them is a Zen priest, and he doesn't believe in an afterlife. So he doesn't believe that we have souls or that the soul continues to live after we're deceased. And of course, through shamanic work, I've talked to dead people all the time.
Not
And
a belief.
you and I moved the dead lady out of my house, which was my first time doing that. So when I've tried to bring that up with the Zen priest, he really didn't want to hear about it. So it's just like, I don't want to talk about this. I'm like, okay.
Not
So
okay.
I'm like, okay, there's the wall. He doesn't want to go there. Okay, no
Mhm.
problem. The second person that I thought of is a psychic medium and a channel, but he doesn't believe in God. So whenever I bring up any discussion about a divine intelligence, he really does not want to hear about it. He's an atheist psychic medium and channel. I don't like, okay.
That sounds like such a contradiction in terms, but everything's possible with us.
Everything's possible, and that's the container he's made for himself. And then the third person is a super channel and a person who calls herself a miracle worker who's declared to me she doesn't believe in demonic entities or negative entities. She said they just don't exist for me. And I was like, nice for you. I deal with them every day. So I was looking at this. I was like, okay, here's three people who exclude something that I have admitted into my world. And how interesting is that? And I was thinking, well, what does that really mean? I said to myself, all it means is that I've made a larger container for myself to be able to receive more knowledge, information, inspiration, and what I hope is more creative energy.
Yeah.
My commitment to myself is just to understand as much as I can about how the world is constructed and how it works. And I'm prepared to do whatever self-work is necessary to integrate what I'm learning, even if it's disturbing or even if it is not what I originally believed or wanted to believe. And
Counter to your own beliefs.
I have my own beliefs. And so I think that in essence is the creative process for me, is how you enlarge your own container in order to receive the divine inspiration and energy of the universe, in order to channel it into something new in the world, or to bring that in a new way that other people can then receive it. And that's the challenge for us, I think, on this journey, is how to be able to bring back what we learn in a way that can be received by others.
Yeah, it's easy to have that that to use spirituality as a dissociative practice, and certainly, it's not unheard of for a person in a Zen practice to be an atheist, um, where the point very often can be simply to find a way to self-regulate and to tap out of the heavier emotions or the heavier thinking and all that, to find some middle path there as a pretty almost a utilitarian factor, where others would use it for more of a place to enter into that union with the divine. And I'm sure there's much we don't know about those individual differences that if we did, it would be even more magical than problematic, right? And so I think that's a wonderful thing. And it really makes, it's a very interesting thing um, to think about in terms of, I know a lot of innovators that do really great things. They talk about what you're talking about, being open, questioning, curious, and these sorts of things. But yet you're describing something where a lot of people are challenged. What happens when your network is not carbon copies or clones? What happens Because the innovators also say it's very important that we associate and get new ideas from meeting different types of people. And I know one of the key factors is having an open intellect. But what are some of the things that maybe you've seen or that you've dealt with in yourself that you've had to overcome those differences in order to maintain a network? I mean, you're a networker.
I am a networker. That's a very good question, Kelly, and I'm still learning the answer to that. It's a challenge a lot of the time, I must say. I feel like I've been in a very intense phase over the last 3 years of self-examination and also revisiting all my core wounds from my earliest childhood. And I had an astrology reading by a wonderful person who did a great job on this. Her name is Heather Roan Robbins. I highly recommend her for a wonderful astrology reading. She does it live and she records it for you. But she's a deep intuitive, so the reading is at a way deep level, not just of the chart. And so she said, "Oh, you've just come through a phase transit where you've been examining all your core wounds from the very beginning." And I was like, "Oh, well, that explains a lot." And it just felt like a journey of shedding a lot, shedding. So as I've been shedding, the interesting thing is that I kind of would come up against places where the relationships that I have didn't feel like they were in sync anymore. And I started to notice the places where they weren't reciprocal relationships. And I started to listen to my body more rather than my mind. I allowed myself to drop into the lower dantian, like you've taught me through our work with Montauk Chia's teachings and the Taoist shamanic work, to get down more into my gut and to start feeling, what does this feel like? And I started to notice like where the relationships really feel like they're amplifying both people, or a lot of times that we're giving each other feedback. I feel like I've known you for 30 years. I feel like it's so easy to work with you. These conversations go by so fast. I wish they could be longer. Oh, what if we do this together? What if we do this together? It's just percolating. And then others I can see, oh, it's really one-sided. I'm giving a lot. I'm not really receiving. I'm chasing. They're not interested. I think that this is such a great thing. I'm learning. I'm experiencing the beautiful freedom and the flow that comes from being with your soul tribe, being with people that are like you. There's nobody out there who agrees with me 100% of the time, but the members of the soul tribe all share some common values. And what I find is that there's a dedication to the truth. Mm-hmm. There's a curiosity and an open-mindedness. There's a positive attitude about can do. Yeah, we can solve problems. No, we're not victims. Yes, we can deal with what comes up. And then there's also a reciprocal respect and concern for each other, and a knowledge that we all go through ups and downs. And the people that I can count on have proven themselves, and I've been there for them. So it's just a beautiful time. And that's part of the reason why I'm so grateful to you for creating Soul Lab and for putting this wonderful group of 25 people together in this first test, because I can see they're all seekers. They all are incredibly curious, and I can already see what depths of creativity they're bringing in many, many ways, just by what they're sharing and posting, the questions that they're sharing, the things they're volunteering and signing up to help with.
Yeah.
This is the sort of thing that gives me a lot of hope. And I have no idea if I answered your question, but that's just the best I can do right now.
No, thank you. I think that's a great place to bring it around. We all are stepping into mystery, as Joseph Campbell alluded to, and our journeys on the path. And the best we are asked to do is to show up and honor our commitment to the vision that has us more than we have it. And it is guiding us in ways that we don't know. And I do like, as Grant Maxwell's book talks about in the dynamics of transformation, we're entering into this post modern phase where we're not all in these fractious little caves and doing our own thing, but there is the field is calling us all together in a really dynamic way. And to listen to that call and to listen to the insights into how to dynamically engage each other is something I'm learning a lot about, excited about in this program, and to live into these questions. And so in this week 2, we're formulating the questions that will form the World Cafe that we're going to do for the remainder of the journey. And it's these questions that we are asking of each other. My first question was very pointed, and how do I, or what is the dynamics that make coming together so powerful for you? But then as Kimberly was looking at it, she says, well, that's a very leading question. I said, well, it's a very direct question. She said, but yes, but if somebody were just walking into the door, would that be what you would say? And I realized, there's a part of me, a little Asperger, like I just like to get to it. But it's also understanding the dance that we have with each other, where we trust that things are going to come through as they will, but we also trust that something is dynamic in the field and that people come and go as they're meant to, and that we can relax in that and just be authentic and real. But as long as we're holding that vision of what it is, we come around the circle. As long as we are focused on the fire in the middle, we can trust that it'll guide us and that we all can be in our authenticity and our uniqueness while also being immersed in a whole on that is greater than. And Tom Campbell talks about it. It's like it's time. All of the arts and sciences are coming together. It's time for us all to come together and merge into something greater. And there's incredible relief in that because we are being guided by something. So I'm so glad you decided to be a part of this, and I was really wanting you to be a part of this. Everyone in this first group were folks that I really wanted to be a part of this, and together we're holding space for this mystery. So my simple question came down to, as Kimberly was working, she's like, what is it about the concept of Soul Lab that excites you? And I'm like, well, that's a very good come into the door kind of question, and it does leave room for, well, this or that or this or that. So I'm opening myself up more and more for the wisdom of the collective, and for this group especially, because I love everyone in it, to hold space for what we don't know. This isn't an exposition of what we do know. And as you and I come together, we talk about, we share, but a lot of it's just coming through from these unknown places. And I love that. We're holding space for the I-thou relationship, the God between, to come through. And I think that is the magic of dialectic, saying it's not really about my point or your point exactly. It's about what happens when our perspective synapse and something bigger comes through.
Well said. It's the magic of the amplification. I call it the amplification or the synergies.
Absolutely.
And one last thing important about what you just said is that we are learning how to dance together. Well, first of all, you have to want to dance together.
Right.
There has to be a desire for that. And
yeah.
Some people get it and some people don't. And I would say, as a piece of advice to those curious about how to move forward in creating their soul tribe, or how to create these collectives, or how to do this work on a bigger scale, that the first task is to find the others. Yeah. Find the ones who are like you. Take the path of least resistance. Find the others who already understand and get it, and start uniting them first. Don't try to crack the hard nuts first. Wait till later when you've got critical mass, because those people won't get it and they will stymie you. So do find the others who are interested and willing and desire to dance, and then all shall be a beautiful flow.
I thank you for that. That is big wisdom. It's a hard-earned wisdom. I know for myself, and I'm sure it was for you. And I look forward to continuing this discussion. Thanks for giving us a look into your creative process. And I look forward to seeing you in the discussion boards. And I think we should do many more of these processes. And maybe you can give us some sage advice along the way from a production side.
It would be my pleasure. Thank you so much, Kelly. Always wonderful to talk to you. I learn every single time.
Same here. And again, I could talk to you forever. So thank you, everyone. I hope you got something from this. Enjoy the process of coming together. Next week, we're going to take our questions and move into our groups where we're going to dive into discussions much like this. I would even encourage you to get on a Zoom call with each other, record it, share it with a group. I think that would be a fantastic idea. I love any method, but writing and writing and writing and reading text is good, but this is incredible. So if you guys decided to get together in your groups and not do it so asynchronously, do it at the same time to share with the group, even 10 minutes is an incredible gift. Thank you guys for being a part of this. We're together, we're creating something, we're learning about what's coming forward, and we're holding space for the mystery of what's unfolding. Holly with Artists United is going to share her wisdom along the way. And all of you have an incredible amount of wisdom, and I can't wait to interview each one of you. So we'll talk soon. Thank you, Holly, and have an incredible day.
Thanks, Kelly.
Bye, everyone. Talk to you soon.